Hi, I am Bernadette, and I am the founder of Burns Bench, and I am a functional medicine practitioner, personal trainer, and your transformation bestie. And at this point in my recordings, I felt like it was the most important thing to do to tell you my story. If you are a woman over 40, burnt out and exhausted, and you are ready to lead differently, this is for you. I want to tell you my journey of how I got to Burns Bench. I grew up in a family of 11 children. I was in entrepreneurship probably from the time I was 5. We ran our own business. I was a hard worker. It was always about doing more. It was always about hustle and grind. It was always about you're never allowed to rest because there's so many things to do. And growing up in that culture was a perfect fit for being an entrepreneur, which I have been my whole entire life. I had a business for 28 years. I ran that business with 12 employees, had 2 children that, my husband and I were raising, playing 2 sports, doing all the things. If you are that woman who is overwhelmed and feeling like they're trying to balance everything out, this story is for you. We are trying to figure out how to balance it all, right? How to be the mom, how to be the boss, how to be the friend, the woman, my identity outside of all of those titles. And I was holding it all together. On the outside, I was pulling it all off. I was being the great mama. I was running the business. Things were growing. And the hustle and grind concept works until it doesn't work for you anymore. And I took hustle and grind to its tipping point. There are these people in the world that can't figure out how to do their self care because they're taking care of everybody else. I was one of those women who did it all. I thought if I just take care of my self care and max that out, I could do all the other things. And so I took everything to its edge until that edge broke. And the breaking point for me was 2 big phenomenal points in my life where I remember going to a yoga class at 5 o'clock in the morning, and every muscle in my body, everything in my body was telling me I was tapped, I was exhausted, and I couldn't do anymore. But I was convincing myself that I was going to a yoga class and I was doing all the right things and I was doing everything that was keeping me strong, but I knew something was breaking. And what had happened is I completely went into adrenal burnout and went into hypothyroidism. I gained 25 pounds. I was fatigued. I was exhausted, but I didn't understand what was going on with my body. And it wasn't until a functional medicine practitioner that I started working with said, you can't get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. You're never going to yoga again. And I had been going 6 days a week for 12 years. And then the other breaking point was listening to a point of I needed to rest, but it wasn't a powerful enough message, which is really so sad. And we hear this over and over again with so many people. We've heard it for years and we still don't listen because we want what we want. But I was in a car accident where somebody broadsided my car. It flipped 3 times in midair. I flipped my car in a park and missed hundreds, 20 trees. I don't know how many trees, and fractured my hip in 3 places, ripped my shoulder, broke my rib. On top of being completely traumatized, I was, awake through that whole thing, flipping in the car. And then the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, stopped me beyond what I would ever do for myself. I couldn't walk. I couldn't get out of the house. I couldn't drive. I couldn't be in public. I was stressed beyond I can't even explain to you in words. Everything stopped me in my tracks. And that was the pivotal moment that I realized the whole universe made me stop. That was the message. I had to reevaluate. That's how the Burns Bench came to light. I needed to understand what I wanted, what I didn't want was no longer serving me, what I had to change, lay out the blueprint. And I'm here to tell you, and I get it, and this is why I created Bern's Bench, is it's scarier than hell. It is scary to think about what your life looks like outside of what you've been doing. But once you realize that what you're doing isn't working for you anymore, I always ask, what is it that keeps us stuck in that place that we think it's serving us, but it's not? And it's because we're scared of change. We're scared of what that looks like. I remember knowing I needed to quit yoga that I had been doing every day for 12 years. And I loved it. I loved the people there. I loved going. I loved what it did for my body and my mind. And so it was scary to think about what my life looked like outside of that if I stopped. And of course, it was fine. It was safe. It was a transition. But I think that's what stops us from making the change that we need. But I really needed to go to the park bench and ask myself what I wanted, go to the craft bench and lay out a blueprint. And that blueprint was I needed to regulate my nervous system. Nobody was telling me how to get what I wanted. They'd say, you need to slow down, you need to not work so hard. I'm like, okay, well, great. What's that look like? What is that? And it wasn't until I was stopped in my tracks in a hospital bed with 3 fractures in my hip and completely in so much pain that the switch had to flip, like I had to turn the light switch on and go, what is it that I want? And the universe was going to stop me whether I wanted to or not. And I knew that at that moment, after that moment, I went through the loss of my mother. I also was told by a doctor that that accident found a cyst on my pancreas. And I was told by a doctor 4 months later, you have a cyst on your pancreas. You have a 99% chance of having pancreatic cancer. You most likely have 6 months to live. And you need to go home and get your life in order. And I literally threw my hands up in the air and said, oh, heck no. That is not the way it's happening. I did resolve all of that. I'll have that conversation in another video, but it was the moment where everything needed to shift. And what I had come to realize was I needed to step away from my business. I needed to be closer to my kids. I needed to find a way to slow down and regulate my nervous system and get back in alignment with what I was really meant to do, which is this: sharing my life story, changing people's lives, and getting women that are exhausted and overwhelmed to prioritize their self-care in a way that serves them so that they can be all the things they need to be in joy, be in laughter, be out of pain, be present for your family and the people you love and care about. So if you are a woman over 40 and you're exhausted and you're overwhelmed, but you don't have a blueprint, you don't have a way to get from point A to point B, getting up that mountain feels like an overwhelmed project that you don't know how to even take step 1. I want you to, first of all, look at the link in the bio of this video and join the Bern's Bench Facebook community group, where we have a safe, private group of women who are supporting each other through this process, what we call life, right? Then we chime into my 90-day Bern's Bench method of how we get from point A to point B. And I will take you on every process that completely changed my life, to stopping the overwhelm, to feeling like I'm in full alignment with who I was meant to be, how I was meant to live, and how I was meant to change lives. And that's what I call living in your power. I had to learn how to not make everything a forest fire and keep things as a campfire and only do what I had the capacity to do in a certain day and not beat myself up for, I want to say for not doing enough, but it's not that. It's feeling like that you're not enough. I say to myself a lot of times at this point in my life, I'm enough if I do nothing today. And I'm here to remind you of that. And you will learn that through our Facebook community page. You will learn that through the 90-day Burns Bench method, and know beyond everything and every fiber of my being through this journey that I have been on that I can support you in knowing that there are answers. But the first thing we have to do is we have to know what we want and what we don't want. We have to not be afraid of what that looks like. We have to lay out a blueprint of what are the forest fires and what are the campfires. And then we do the reps. And that's where I support you through the process. It has been nothing but an honor through this journey to be a part of changing others' lives. And I can only hope that my story hits home and changes a part of yours. And I will see you on the bench.